Maura's Moxie. How have the American elites whitewashed the CCP's crimes, for example, oppressing political dissidents and Tibetans?
You go to a bookstore, and again, after the CCP virus and the death toll and the carnage, this may change. But with the normalization of the CCP that the American elites have worked so hard on since 1972, when the Kissinger Doctrine was first implemented, which is we've got to embrace the Soviet Union. There was this gamble of détente. Let's work with communist China to contain the Soviet Union. And my father said, you know, that was a foolish, foolish strategy, because any cab driver in Moscow could tell you everybody in Russia was broke. And one difference between the Chinese communists and the old Bolsheviks of the Soviet Union is that the old Soviet Union was economically isolated. And so when Gorbachev, who was a man I greatly admire, who allowed the peaceful dissolution of the Soviet Union, and I grew up in the time of mutualist destruction between America and the Soviet Union. We used to have fire drills in case there was an atom bomb, and we were told we had to hate Russians, and there was this, you know, terrible sense that any moment there could be a nuclear cataclysm of Russia attacking America. Well, so he came along, Gorbachev, and he allowed the peaceful dissolution of the Soviet Union. As I think most of your viewers will know, he came to Beijing in the spring of 1989, when the students had gathered in Tiananmen Square after the death of Yu Yabong. And you forgive my Mandarin pronunciation. But Yu Yabong was a man I greatly admired because he was a CCP reformer. And he went to Tibet in 1971 and 72, and he wrote a white paper that condemned the CCP for the brutal and cruel treatment of the Tibetan people. And so he was always a hero to the Tibetan people, that he had the courage to stand up to Mao and say, look what we've done. We've got to do better. If we're going to annex these countries, we've got to do better. And so Gorbachev comes at that time, and we were very hopeful, a lot of us, that this could be a moment where there would be change in China, where they would follow the example of Gorbachev and dismantle the Communist Party and try something else. If
Unfortunately,
not a Swedish-style democracy, at least something that wasn't the Communist Party. Which, by the way, this is one thing when I argue with Western elites, I always say, you know, communism is not a Chinese philosophy.
no.
Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1851 in the British Museum Library of London. He was a German bourgeois. He called himself an intellectual. I think his writing is horrible. And and this goes back to the normalization of the CCP. You hear a lot of academics in America say, oh, Marx was such a wonderful writer, and Mao was such a wonderful writer. I beg to disagree. I think you read them, it's like the gruntings of an asura, a dundre, or demigod. Asura is Sanskrit for a demon, and dundre is Tibetan for demon. And I reread parts of the Communist Manifesto a couple months ago. Every now and then I go on the Marx page, you know, the website, and it made me sick. It made me sick. It goes back, and so these elites that explain away the crimes of the Chinese Communist Party also seem to have forgotten about the Holocaust. They seem to have forgotten that fascism and communism are very similar, of course, as we know. Now, this book is a laugh out loud gutbuster. It's comedy, but it's not. It doesn't intend to be comedic, but it's outrageous and it's shocking and it's sort of a joke at the same time. Doing business in China for dummies. And there is not one mention in here that China is a communist country. You won't find a reference to the Communist Party. You will in China business etiquette, because they've got to cover their ass, because the Shanghai Amchang Shanghai gang, pardon me, I'll say that again. You won't find any mention of the Chinese Communist Party in, you won't find any mention of it in Doing Business in China for Dummies. But you will in doing a Chinese business etiquette, because this is a project of the Amchang Shanghai gang.
Oh.
And they are based in China, and they got to cover their ass a little bit. So, and you should see what they say in here about the Cultural Revolution, which was a terrible tragedy for the Chinese people, as every Chinese person knows, especially a lot of the Hong Kong intellectuals who lived into it, the freedom swimmers who swam, got to Canton and managed to swim to Hong Kong, and the stories they told of the atrocities, the burning of books, the torture and persecution of intellectuals. They say, oh, well, the Cultural Revolution was kind of a blip, but we're over that now. Well, we're certainly not over it in Tibet. We're certainly not over in Xinjiang. And what about Liu Xiaobo? What about his wife, who managed to escape last summer to Germany? Thank goodness. A woman I want to meet one day. I've painted many portraits of Liu Xiaobo. And on our interview, we'll talk about my art. But back to the elites, I think it really is just a lack of morality. They can't say they didn't know. That's a lie. They all saw the Tiananmen Square massacre. They can't say that we Tibet people didn't do our best to put evidence of torture in front of them. For example, I am the executive producer of this film. It was directed by my friend Masako Sumera. She's Japanese. It's called Fire Under the Snow. It's based on this book, The Autobiography of a Tibetan Monk by Palden Gyatso. Palden Gyatso died last year in Dharamsala, the home of His Holiness Dalai Lama. He was a Tibetan monk who spent 33 years in the notorious Dropshi prison in Lhasa, the capital of Tibet. His crime was the same of Liu Xiaobo and Dr. Li, counter-revolutionary thought. He was a Buddhist monk. For that reason, they put electric cattle prods into his mouth. They starved him, they whipped him, they beat him. You'll find photographs in here of the destruction of Tibetan monasteries. And he managed to smuggle the torture instruments that were used on him. He smuggled them out. Right here. Are the electric cattle prods, the knives, the other tools, torture tools that they would use on Tibetan prisoners of conscience. He had the electric cattle prod put in his mouth many times. He lost all his teeth. So when he came into exile, we were able to pay for him to go to the dentist and get dentures. And I have several Tibetan friends who were Buddhist nuns who were caught with small photographs of the Dalai Lama that were hidden. For this, which is considered a crime under Chinese law, Chinese communist law, they were raped with electric cattle prods. They had electric cattle prods put in to their bodies. And most of the girls will die of blood loss when this happens, but a few of them were able to escape into Nepal and then to India, and one is living in New Jersey now. And you should have her on your show. She speaks English very well.
Oh, right. Okay.